My favorite memory of Elvis was spending his 40th birthday with him. The guys that worked with him, the Memphis Mafia, as they call themselves. We all went to, I think it was Vail, Colorado, to ski, right? It was going to be his birthday, and he was going to spend it there because he kind of liked it up there.
Her favorite memory of Elvis Presley isn't a concert. It isn't a hit record, or the jumpsuits, or the screaming crowds. It's a birthday, in the snow, in Colorado. A birthday Elvis suddenly decided he did not want to have. On the day itself, the biggest star on the planet called the whole celebration off and sent everyone home. And then, a few hours later, he did something almost nobody would guess. And it's the clearest window we have into the private Elvis. Not the king. The man. The one who was funny and strange and lonelier than his fame should ever have allowed. This is the story of that birthday, told by one of the very few people who was in the room. Her name is Myrna Smith, and to understand the night, you first have to meet the little army of people Elvis kept around him at all times. The Memphis Mafia. It sounds ominous, but the name was half a joke. Reporters pinned it on them in the early years because of the matching dark suits and sunglasses. In reality, it was a tight ring of childhood friends, cousins, and bodyguards who ran Elvis's entire world. Men like Red and Sonny West, Joe Esposito, Charlie Hodge, and Jerry Schilling. They had a motto, taking care of business, with a lightning bolt, and they did exactly that. They drove him, guarded him, fed him, handled his money, watched his movies with him, and stayed up with him until dawn, for years. Elvis paid their salaries, and he gave them cars, jewelry, sometimes even houses. To the outside world, it looked like a spoiled king surrounded by a court of freeloaders living off his money. But the truth was almost the reverse. And this one birthday trip proves it better than anything. On a whim in January, Elvis had flown a party of around 17 people out west. Girlfriends, the guys, and two of his singers, Myrna and Jerry Schilling, who by then were a couple. They flew into Denver. The local police actually helped them find lodging. And the whole circus headed up to the ski town of Vail for his birthday. And then, on the day itself, Elvis did something that stopped the entire party cold.
And all of a sudden, he decided he didn't want to be 40. So he didn't want anybody around him. So he called everybody and said, "That's okay, don't come up to the house."
He suddenly decided he didn't want a birthday at all. So he called it off. Don't come up, don't celebrate, leave me be. Now, one honest note before we go any further, because we care about getting this right. Myrna remembered it as his 40th. The documented Vail trip happened about a year later, around his 41st. Memory blurs the two, and it doesn't change what she saw. What she's certain about is the mood. And that mood had roots, because turning 40 had genuinely rattled Elvis the year before. The tabloids had been vicious about it. One infamous cover ran, in effect, Elvis at 40, paunchy, depressed, and living in fear. Imagine being one of the most famous men alive and reading that about yourself at the supermarket checkout. Around that time, he became convinced a Johnny Carson monologue had made a joke at his expense, and by several accounts, it stung enough that he cooled on the show. This from a man who genuinely loved Carson. Friends described him pulling into a kind of self-imposed seclusion. So whatever the exact candle count that night in the snow, the man who waved everyone off wasn't just in a passing sulk. He was carrying a real, recent dread of getting older. And whatever he asked, the guys did it. They scattered. And what they assumed about that free night tells you exactly what most people get wrong about them.
They figured since we don't have to babysit him tonight, we'll go out and do our other thing, because Elvis always liked to have people around.
Listen to the word she uses, babysit. That's the quiet truth of the Memphis Mafia. A huge part of the job wasn't security or errands at all. It was simply being present so that Elvis was rarely alone. Friends repeatedly described him as uncomfortable being on his own. He had flipped his whole life to run at night. He'd sleep through the day, wake up around 9 in the evening, and hold court until sunrise, with the lights on and people filling the rooms of Graceland. He built a racquetball court so the guys would have a reason to stay up with him. He'd rent out entire venues after hours just to have somewhere to go with a crowd. By those same accounts, an empty, quiet house was the thing he liked least. So the men around him weren't parasites cadging a free ride on a famous man. They were company, on call, around the clock. So he was rarely, if ever, without someone nearby. And Myrna, who watched it up close for years, wanted that particular myth corrected.
Thought that the guys around him were hangers-on, but they were there because Elvis wanted them there. And when he didn't want them there, he let them know.
They were there because he wanted them there, not using him, chosen by him. And notice the sharp little edge on the end of what she says. When Elvis wanted you gone, you knew it, fast. He ran his own world, and the same instinct for company that pulled people close could reverse on a bad night. Hold on to that, because it comes back before we're done. But right now, picture the scene. He sent everyone off. The guys, thrilled to have a rare night with no Elvis to keep company, scatter into Vail to do their own thing. Myrna and Jerry are back in their condo, not expecting a thing. And this is exactly where the private Elvis gives himself away. Quick bit of context first, because it makes the story better. This is the same Myrna Smith who, when Elvis first hired her group, wasn't even impressed by him. She thought his music was almost silly. There's a video on this channel about how that flipped completely, called "She Wasn't Impressed by Elvis Until She Heard Him Live." Keep it in mind. The woman telling you this warm story started out a full skeptic. Now, the phone in the condo rings.
Jerry and I, we just hanging around in our condo. Got another call. I said, I changed my mind. He said, would you and Myrna come up?
I changed my mind. 3 words, and the whole man is in them. He'd been so certain he wanted to be alone on his birthday. And he lasted, a couple of hours? The dread of 40 told him to hide. The deeper thing in him simply couldn't do it. But look closely at who he called back. Not the whole entourage, not a party. 2 people. Jerry, one of his closest friends, and Myrna. A quiet evening with people he trusted completely. That isn't a diva reassembling his court. That's a man who didn't want to face his own birthday alone and knew precisely whose company would feel like home. If you're enjoying the private side of Elvis, the one his singers actually knew, subscribe to Retro Secrets. It's the whole point of this channel. Now, when Myrna and Jerry got up to the house, the birthday waiting for them was not some catered superstar affair. It was homemade.
And at the time, Elvis was with Linda Thompson. I think Linda she didn't make a cake, but she made something that resembled a cake.
Something that resembled a cake. You have to love that. No chef, no caterer, no spectacle. Just Elvis's girlfriend doing her best in a rented ski condo kitchen, producing a sort of cake-adjacent object for a superstar's birthday. The girlfriend was Linda Thompson, a former Miss Tennessee who was with Elvis for about 4 years in the 70s. By every account, she matched his goofy, quick sense of humor beat for beat. They'd actually met at one of his late-night movie screenings, and the very first thing she ever said to him was to tease him about the Dracula cape he'd walked in wearing. Years later, she'd become a hit songwriter, writing ballads for Whitney Houston and others. But on this night, she was just a young woman making a lopsided cake for a man who didn't want to be 40 in a house in the snow for a tiny audience of 2. And then Elvis reached for the thing that always rescued him when his mood dropped: a movie.
Elvis asked me, have you ever seen the movie Across 110th Street? And I made the mistake of saying no, but I hadn't seen it.
I made the mistake of saying no. She flags it as a mistake, and anyone who knew Elvis is already grinning because they know what's coming. Movies weren't a hobby for Elvis. They were an obsession and a refuge. He physically could not go to a normal cinema. He'd be swarmed before the trailers finished. So back home in Memphis, he did the only thing a man like that could do. He rented an entire movie theater, a real one, called the Memphian after it closed for the night, and he'd screen brand new films there for himself and the guys until the sun came up. This was before home screening rooms, so night after night, the king of rock and roll and his friends had a whole cinema to themselves in the dark, popcorn and all, sometimes till 4 or 5 in the morning. It was one of the deepest pleasures of his life. So when Myrna admitted she'd never seen the film he was excited about, she'd unknowingly handed him the perfect birthday activity. But first, the movie itself was a strange choice.
Now, if you knew Elvis, you know that if he saw a movie that he liked, he could watch it 100 times, which meant that he knew all the dialogue.
He could watch a film he loved 100 times and absorb the entire thing, every line, every character. And this part is genuinely well documented. Elvis had an intense passion for comedy especially. He'd stay up until the first light of morning running Peter Sellers movies, Monty Python, Johnny Carson monologues. And he could recite whole routines from memory, doing the voices, playing the parts. For a man who battled dark moods, laughter was medicine, and mimicry was his party trick. Now here's the twist. The film he'd locked onto for this particular night, Across 110th Street, wasn't a comedy at all. It was a hard, violent 1972 crime thriller set in Harlem, about as far from birthday cheer as a movie can get. Didn't matter to Elvis. He loved it. He knew it cold. And Myrna had just confessed she'd never seen it. So Elvis offered her the only solution that made sense to him. He wouldn't play the movie. He would become the movie.
We spent his birthday with him acting out all the parts with all the dialogue to across 110th Street. So I never had the need to go watch the movie because I know that movie. He told me the whole movie.
Sit with that image for a moment, because it may be the most human picture of Elvis Presley you will ever get. The most famous man on the planet, on the birthday he was dreading, in a rented house in the snow, up on his feet, playing every single character in a 2-hour crime film, doing the voices, nailing the lines, the tough guys, the cops, all of it. A one-man show, beginning to end, for an audience of exactly 2. He didn't press play, he performed. A private movie nobody paid for, and nobody outside that room ever saw. Myrna says she never bothered to watch the real film afterward because she'd already seen the definitive version, the one starring Elvis, as everybody. Think about what that takes. Not just the memory, but the sheer, generous, slightly ridiculous desire to entertain 2 friends rather than sit in a mood. And this wasn't some one-night eccentricity. It was simply how Elvis lived. On holidays, he'd send one of the guys across the state line for a whole carload of fireworks and announce that it was, in his words, time to play war. A dozen grown men in football helmets and heavy coats firing Roman candles and cherry bombs at each other across the Graceland lawn until somehow nobody was hurt and everybody's clothes were full of little scorched holes. There were water pistol ambushes down hotel corridors on tour and water balloon raids that went on for whole nights. He'd rent an entire amusement park after it closed to the public, every ride running, the cotton candy stands open, just so he and his friends could ride the roller coaster over and over till dawn with no crowds and nobody staring. And the people who were there almost always mentioned the same thing first, before any of the stunts. The laugh, big, helpless, and completely infectious. Play seems to have been one of the ways he kept himself, and everyone around him, occupied. So the birthday Myrna is describing wasn't an exception. It was the man himself, distilled. Which is why the way she sums up that night rings so true.
But we had a blast. I mean, he was really funny that night.
He was really funny that night. That's how the birthday he tried to cancel actually ended. Not in gloom, but in laughter. A man who'd been terrified of getting older on his feet, acting out a movie and cracking up his 2 friends. Now, I promised you the other edge of this, and honesty requires it. The same instinct that made him call Myrna and Jerry back could also flip without warning. Just days after this birthday, on this very trip, one of those sudden late-night moods led Elvis to try to move Jerry Schilling out of his room in the middle of the night. And Jerry, worn down by the swings, quietly walked away from the inner circle for good. The same man who so disliked an empty room could still, on a bad night, push away the very people who filled it. That's the ache underneath all the fun. And yet, look at how he kept reaching for people. A few days later, on this same trip, he walked into a Denver dealership and bought a small fleet of Cadillacs and Lincolns on the spot for his guys and for near strangers on the Denver police force who'd helped them out. Giving was just another way he pulled people close. So here's what that one birthday tells us. The public Elvis was the king, untouchable, larger than life. The private Elvis was a man who lived at night, who by every account hated being on his own, who waved his own birthday away and then couldn't stay away from company, who could be maddening and generous in the same week, and who was, under all of it, genuinely, disarmingly funny. So let me ask you honestly, which version of a famous person do you actually want to know? The one on the poster, or the one acting out an entire movie in a rented living room because he couldn't bear his own birthday alone? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more of the Elvis the people in the room actually knew, subscribe to Retro Secrets. I'll see you in the next one.